The midnight asphalt of Interstate 95 is melting under the furious friction of a heavy-duty, reinforced black transport truck tearing through the darkness at 120 miles per hour, pursued by a dozen heavily armored SWAT BearCat vehicles and an airborne armada of police helicopters slicing the night sky with high-intensity thermal searchlights. This is not a standard highway chase. This is a calculated high-stakes counter-terrorism operation unfolding in real time, because inside that speeding fortress of steel is a classified payload so volatile that its escape beyond state lines will trigger a catastrophic national security event within the next 45 minutes. Command dispatch radios are exploding with static and high-stress commands as the tactical director barks orders to seal every exit block, every ramp, and authorize deadly force if necessary. But the driver of the black truck has no intention of stopping. Pressing the accelerator to the floorboards and slamming directly through the first concrete and steel police barricade in a shower of sparks and shattered fiberglass. Sirens are wailing a chorus of impending doom while the SWAT tactical unit realizes that standard pit maneuvers are completely useless against a 10-ton kinetic bullet, forcing the commander to authorize an unprecedented, highly classified mid-motion highway assault tactic that has never been successfully executed in the history of modern law enforcement. The shadows of the highway are swallowed by the blinding glare of high beams as the distance between the heavily armed operatives and the mysterious target shrinks to zero, kicking off a deadly game of speed, psychological warfare, and absolute darkness, where a single millisecond of hesitation means instant death. Every tire screech echoes like a gunshot across the barren landscape as the elite operatives brace themselves for a terrifying confrontation with an enemy who seems to know every single move before they even make it. The operational pressure inside the command center is suffocating as the red digital clock counts down the minutes until the target truck reaches the city limits where the jurisdiction ends and the crowded urban labyrinth begins. The tactical commander stares at the satellite tracking screen, knowing that the nature of the cargo is so intensely classified that even the assault team putting their lives on the line has been kept entirely in the dark about what they are truly chasing. Rumors are circulating through the encrypted radio frequencies about everything from weaponized bioagents to stolen nuclear launch triggers, but the only absolute certainty is that this vehicle cannot, under any circumstances, be allowed to cross the metropolitan border. Regular highway patrol units and local police cruisers have been strictly ordered to pull back and maintain a distance of at least 2 miles, because their standard-issue body armor and light vehicles would be instantly obliterated if the cargo detaches or detonates. This absolute isolation leaves the entire weight of the operation resting squarely on the shoulders of 12 elite SWAT operatives who are currently strapped into their accelerating tactical vehicles, checking their weapon systems in the dim red interior light. The psychological burden is immense because they are flying completely blind into a tactical meat grinder chasing an unknown nightmare at breakneck speeds, while the rest of the world sleeps peacefully, completely unaware that a major geopolitical crisis is unfolding on the very highway they commute on every single morning. The black transport truck is handling the high-speed turns with an impossible level of precision, suggesting that the driver is either an elite military-trained wheelman or the vehicle itself has been heavily modified with aftermarket racing suspension and a bulletproof drivetrain. Suddenly, the tactical situation degrades rapidly as 3 unmarked, blacked-out SUVs materialize from the darkness of an abandoned rest stop, instantly forming a defensive screen around the primary target and opening fire on the lead SWAT vehicles with high-caliber automatic weapons. Tracers light up the midnight sky like a horrific laser show as the armored windshields of the police vehicles absorb a hail of armor-piercing bullets, forcing the convoy into a chaotic high-speed evasive formation across all 4 lanes of the interstate. The police helicopter overhead struggles to maintain its thermal lock as the escort SUVs intentionally deploy thick clouds of military-grade smoke and infrared disrupting chaff, blinding the aerial observers and forcing the ground teams to rely entirely on raw instinct and radar telemetry. It becomes instantly clear that this is not a desperate escape attempt by low-level criminals, but a highly coordinated, well-funded paramilitary extraction operation that has anticipated the exact response time of law enforcement. The gap between the SWAT vehicles and the target truck expands and contracts like an accordion, as both sides fight for lane dominance, turning the public highway into a literal war zone where the slightest miscalculation will send several tons of steel rolling violently into the median. Realizing that a prolonged chase will inevitably lead to a catastrophic crash when the highway intersects with the upcoming suburban sprawl, the SWAT tactical commander makes a desperate and unprecedented executive decision. He authorizes a high-risk vertical to horizontal insertion strategy, a tactical maneuver that requires the primary assault vehicle to pull directly alongside the speeding trailer while specialized operatives leap across the high-speed gap. Aerial sniper assets stationed on the open doors of the hovering helicopters are instructed to provide suppressive fire, aiming specifically for the engine blocks and tires of the escort SUVs to peel away the defensive layer. The helicopters drop to a dangerously low altitude just 30 feet above the highway superstructure, their rotor wash creating a violent vortex of dust and debris that severely limits visibility for everyone involved. The margin for error is absolutely non-existent, because if an operative slips during the transition, they will be instantly crushed beneath the massive wheels of the transport truck traveling at over 100 miles per hour. The snipers exhale slowly, timing their shots with the rhythmic swaying of the aircraft, and pull their triggers simultaneously, sending heavy tungsten penetrators directly through the hoods of the escort vehicles, causing them to explode into spectacular fireballs that illuminate the highway in a hellish orange glow. With the escorts neutralized, the primary SWAT BearCat accelerates violently, pulling its armored flank directly parallel to the roaring black trailer, setting the stage for the final terrifying breach. The deafening roar of the wind, the screaming engines, and the grinding of metal against metal create an apocalyptic symphony as the SWAT assault vehicle locks its armored side against the vibrating flank of the moving truck. Operative Miller, the lead breacher, stands in the open side door of the BearCat, his tactical boots gripping the edge as the freezing night air lashes against his ballistic visor. With absolute precision, he fires a heavy-duty pneumatic grappling anchor into the side door of the truck's driver cabin, securing a high-tensile steel cable that bridges the terrifying 2-foot gap between the two massive machines. The driver of the target truck notices the breach and violently swerves to the left, attempting to crush the operatives against the concrete highway divider wall, sending a massive shower of white-hot sparks into the air and tearing the external armor plates off the police vehicle. Miller ignores the terrifying grinding sound, waits for the exact moment of stabilization, and leaps across the void, landing heavily on the narrow running board of the speeding transport truck. He immediately deploys a localized flashbang charge directly against the reinforced glass of the driver's window, detonating it in a blinding burst of light and concussive force designed to instantly disorient the operator inside. The window shatters into millions of tiny fragments, and Miller reaches inside, grabbing the steering wheel with one hand while using his free hand to neutralize the driver's control, fighting a desperate physical battle for dominance over a runaway machine. With the driver successfully incapacitated by the concussive force of the breach, Miller reaches down and slams his foot onto the heavy air brake pedal, causing the massive 20-wheeler to lock its rear tires in a violent scream of burning rubber. The entire 10-ton apparatus fishtails wildly across the highway, creating a massive wall of white smoke as the friction melts the tires down to the steel rims before the vehicle finally grinds to a halt sideways across the lanes. Within seconds, the remaining SWAT vehicles surround the steaming beast in a perfect tactical cordon, their doors flying open as heavily armed operatives flood the pavement with weapons raised, creating an impenetrable wall of ballistic shields. The secondary tactical team moves swiftly to the rear of the trailer, setting up a heavy-duty linear thermal cutting charge around the reinforced locking mechanisms of the massive rear cargo doors. The commander barks orders over the radio to maintain high vigilance, suspecting a potential counter-ambush or an explosive booby trap designed to take out the entire tactical unit in a single blast. The sparks from the thermal cutting torch cascade down onto the dark asphalt like a waterfall of fire as the thick steel locks begin to liquefy under the intense 5,000-degree heat. Every operative holds their breath, their hearts pounding against their chest plates, prepared to face whatever terrifying technological anomaly or weapon of mass destruction is hiding behind the smoking steel barriers. The heavy steel locking bars finally give way with a loud metallic clang, and the massive rear doors of the transport truck are thrown wide open by the tactical entry team, who immediately flood the interior with their weapon-mounted flashlights. But instead of encountering a heavily armed defense force or a massive glowing container of weaponized material, the operatives are met with absolute dead silence and an empty void. The interior of the massive trailer is completely undeniably empty, devoid of any crates, containers, or chemical transport units, featuring nothing but bare aluminum walls, reflecting the cold glare of their tactical lights. The lead operative steps inside his boots, echoing hollowly against the metal floorboards, his confusion rapidly turning into a deep, sinking feeling of pure dread as he realizes the tactical implications of this discovery. The entire high-speed pursuit, the violent escort vehicles, the suicidal driving maneuvers, and the massive deployment of law enforcement assets had been executed to chase a ghost ship. The commander stands paralyzed in the center of the highway, listening to the frantic reports from his men inside the trailer, realizing that they have been completely played by a mastermind who orchestrated a flawless kinetic diversion. The realization hits the entire team simultaneously like a physical blow. If the real cargo was never on this truck, then the true threat is currently moving entirely undetected somewhere else, completely unbothered by the police force that is currently stranded on a deserted highway miles away. The atmosphere inside the tactical command vehicle completely collapses from high-stakes adrenaline into utter panic as the technological analysts desperately rescan every satellite feed from the past 3 hours. It is fundamentally impossible for a physical object of that size and weight to simply vanish from a moving vehicle that was under constant aerial surveillance by a state-of-the-art police helicopter for the entirety of the pursuit. The forensic team begins tearing through the driver's cabin of the captured truck, searching for any electronic footprint manifest or routing data that could explain how they were so thoroughly deceived. The driver, now handcuffed and bleeding slightly from the window breach, maintains a chilling, completely unbothered expression, refusing to respond to any level of interrogation while staring straight ahead with an unsettling smile. Operative Miller notices a strange, faint blue LED light pulsing rhythmically from deep underneath the modified dashboard assembly, completely separate from the vehicle's standard electrical wiring. He reaches into the tangled mass of wires and pulls out a highly advanced military-grade encrypted satellite transponder that is actively broadcasting a localized signal spoofing protocol. This device had been broadcasting false thermal signatures and weight telemetry data directly to the police department's tracking network, making an empty truck appear to be carrying a multi-ton, highly dense radioactive payload. The digital readout on the recovered military transponder suddenly flickers, transitioning from an active broadcasting state into a rapid countdown sequence that leaves only 45 seconds before a complete data wipe. The technical specialist scrambles to connect an emergency data extraction drive to the device, his fingers flying across his portable terminal as he fights against the disappearing code to trace the origin of the signal. The countdown reaches 5 seconds, just as the progress bar hits 100%, saving a single isolated geographic coordinate map before the transponder's internal memory chips are permanently fried by a microscopic thermite charge. The extracted coordinate does not point to any location on the interstate, nor does it point toward the metropolitan center they were trying so desperately to protect from the imaginary threat. Instead, the blinking red dot on their tactical screens materializes over a highly restricted, privately owned aviation strip located 30 miles in the opposite direction, deep within the dark forest terrain of the northern county. The tactical commander instantly realizes the terrifying brilliance of the enemy's strategy. The decoy truck was deliberately sent south to draw every single high-readiness asset away from the actual extraction point. By mobilizing the entire state's tactical forces to the southern highway, they had inadvertently left the northern airspace and private airfields completely unguarded and devoid of any immediate response capability. The SWAT convoy roars back into action, turning their massive vehicles around in a chaotic U-turn across the grassy median, sirens screaming once again as they race against time toward the private aviation strip. The helicopters push their engines to the absolute mechanical limit, their rotors roaring through the night air as they attempt to cover the 30-mile distance before the true extraction window closes permanently. Minutes feel like hours as they tear through the dark, winding country roads, the smooth asphalt of the interstate replaced by rough gravel and overhanging trees that threaten to clip the low-flying aircraft. When the lead helicopter finally breaks through the tree line and illuminates the private airstrip with its searchlight, the tactical team is met with a scene of absolute abandonment. The runway tarmac is completely clear, showing nothing but fresh dark tire marks from a heavy aircraft that had executed a maximum performance short takeoff maneuver just moments before their arrival. The hangar doors are wide open, swaying gently in the cold night breeze, revealing empty storage racks and discarded packing materials that indicate a highly organized rapid cargo transfer had taken place while they were chasing the decoy. The tactical ground units flood the airfield, weapons drawn, but they are searching a graveyard of missed opportunities, surrounded by the crushing realization that they arrived exactly 3 minutes too late to stop the real operation. The lead investigator rushes into the airfield's automated security control office, kicking the locked door open and immediately accessing the main digital video recording unit to review the perimeter camera feeds from the last 10 minutes. The high-definition screen displays a crystal-clear playback of a sleek, unmarked, long-range private cargo jet idling on the runway with its rear loading ramp lowered to the tarmac. A secondary convoy of nondescript white delivery vans, completely ignored by the police networks, is seen smoothly transferring a heavy, lead-lined metallic container directly into the aircraft's hold. The camera zooms in as a man dressed in an impeccable, high-end, tailored dark suit steps onto the loading ramp, stopping completely just before entering the pressurized cabin of the aircraft. He turns around slowly, looking directly into the lens of the security camera with absolute calmness, as if he knew exactly which investigator would be watching this footage after the fact. He reaches into his jacket pocket, pulls out a small cellular device, and types a brief command that flashes a final mocking message across the security terminal screen in the command center. He offers a slow, polite nod to the camera. The heavy hydraulic ramp seals shut behind him, and the powerful jet engines ignite, lifting the aircraft into the dark sky where it instantly vanishes from civilian radar tracking networks. The text message left behind on the terminal screen glimmers in the dark room, reading a simple, chilling sentence that confirms their absolute defeat. "Thank you for providing the perfect distraction. Your country's tax dollars have successfully financed the safe departure of our asset." The SWAT operatives stand in silence on the empty runway as the distant hum of the jet fades into nothingness, realizing that the most successful tactical raid of their career was nothing more than a carefully scripted stage play for an audience of ghosts. The digital echo of that final message hangs in the damp air of the airfield control room like a physical weight, suffocating the tactical team with the bitter taste of total manipulation. Operative Miller slams his ballistic helmet onto the steel desk, the sharp crack shattering the silence as his team members stare at the blinking radar screen, showing absolutely zero traces of the vanished cargo jet. The tactical commander is already on an encrypted satellite uplink to the highest levels of national intelligence, trying to explain how a multi-million-dollar SWAT deployment was completely neutralized by a single transponder and a well-dressed ghost. The response from the agency directors is a chilling command of absolute silence, ordering the entire unit to immediately seize all security footage, lock down the airfield, and speak to absolutely no one about what they saw. It becomes instantly clear that this operation has crossed the line from a standard law enforcement raid into a dark, geopolitical cover-up where the truth is considered more dangerous than the missing payload itself. Outside on the dark runway, the wind begins to howl through the open hangars, carrying away the scent of burning jet fuel and leaving the elite operatives stranded in the middle of nowhere, holding nothing but empty questions and a deep sense of vulnerability. While the forensic teams meticulously sweep the empty hangar for any microscopic trace evidence, Miller walks back to the edge of the runway where the cargo jet had initialized its powerful takeoff. He kneels down on the cold concrete, tracing the dark skid marks with his gloved hand until his fingers brush against a small metallic object buried in the wild grass at the runway's edge. It is a highly specialized, custom-milled security seal, the exact type used by underground shadow syndicates to lock down high-value biological or technological assets during transit. The seal is broken, snapped cleanly in half by a hydraulic press tool, but the serial number etched onto its polished surface is still completely legible under his tactical flashlight. Miller takes a high-resolution photograph of the code and immediately bypasses the official police network, sending the image directly to an old contact in military intelligence who operates deep within the dark web's classified databases. Within 90 seconds, his modified tactical smartphone vibrates violently in his palm, returning a single, heavily redacted document that sends a cold shiver down his spine. The serial number belongs to a black-budget military research project that was officially shut down by the government 3 years ago, a project codenamed Project Acheron. The encrypted file begins to decrypt slowly on Miller's screen, revealing fragments of highly classified laboratory manifests detailing the development of a next-generation electromagnetic pulse generator, small enough to fit inside a standard briefcase. If detonated in the heart of a major metropolitan area, this specific device wouldn't just knock out the power grid. It would permanently fry the microcircuitry of every financial server, hospital, life support system, and communication network within a 50-mile radius. The realization hits Miller like a physical blow. The man in the dark suit didn't just steal a valuable asset. He just weaponized a tool capable of plunging an entire nation into the dark ages with the push of a single button. The decoy truck on the highway was never meant to protect the device. It was designed to force the city's emergency response teams to concentrate their electronic signatures in one place, allowing the syndicate to map the police department's communication vulnerabilities in real time. Every single radio transmission, tactical command, and GPS coordinate broadcasted during the highway chase was actively harvested by the cargo jet flying directly above them, giving the enemy a complete blueprint of the city's defensive grid. Suddenly, the tactical radios across the entire airfield explode with a massive wave of high-frequency static, followed immediately by the frantic voice of the command center dispatcher broadcasting from 50 miles away. The main power grid in the southern sector of the city has just suffered a catastrophic, unexplained voltage spike, plunging 3 major financial districts into complete and total darkness within a matter of seconds. Emergency backup generators are failing to ignite because their internal computerized control chips have been systematically melted by a localized high-energy discharge. The commander turns to his men, his face pale in the dim light of the airfield, realizing that the cargo jet didn't fly away to escape. It flew to a specific altitude to test the weapon they had just allowed them to steal. Reports begin flooding in about automated traffic systems failing, causing massive multi-car pileups on the very highway they had just spent the last hour trying to secure. The chaos is spreading outward from the city center like an invisible ink blot, paralyzing infrastructure and cutting off all standard law enforcement communication channels, leaving the SWAT team completely isolated on the northern airfield. With standard radio networks completely dead, Miller utilizes his secure military-grade satellite device to maintain a fragile connection with his intelligence contact, desperately searching for the current trajectory of the unmarked cargo jet. The satellite telemetry indicates that the aircraft has changed its course, executing a sharp banking turn toward the coastline where it intends to disappear into international airspace over the Atlantic Ocean within the next 15 minutes. Once the jet clears the maritime border, any military intervention will risk triggering a massive international incident, meaning the window to prevent a total national catastrophe is closing at an impossible speed. Miller grabs the tactical commander by his body armor, forcing him to look at the tracking screen, demanding that they authorize the use of a nearby experimental stealth interceptor drone stationed at a hidden government facility just 5 miles north. The commander hesitates, knowing that launching an unapproved military drone on domestic soil is an act of treason that will instantly end his career and land them all in a federal penitentiary. But as the distant horizon begins to glow with the fires of a city descending into unmanaged chaos, he looks at his men, reaches into his tactical vest, and pulls out the emergency authorization key. Suddenly, the tactical radios across the entire airfield explode with a massive wave of high-frequency static, followed immediately by the frantic voice of the command center dispatcher broadcasting from 50 miles away. The main power grid in the southern sector of the city has just suffered a catastrophic unexplained voltage spike, plunging three major financial districts into complete and total darkness within a matter of seconds. Emergency backup generators are failing to ignite because their internal computerized control chips have been systematically melted by a localized high-energy discharge. The commander turns to his men, his face pale in the dim light of the airfield, realizing that the cargo jet didn't fly away to escape. It flew to a specific altitude to test the weapon they had just allowed them to steal. Reports begin flooding in about automated traffic systems failing, causing massive multi-car pileups on the very highway they had just spent the last hour trying to secure. The chaos is spreading outward from the city center like an invisible ink blot, paralyzing infrastructure and cutting off all standard law enforcement communication channels, leaving the SWAT team completely isolated on the northern airfield. With standard radio networks completely dead, Miller utilizes his secure military-grade satellite device to maintain a fragile connection with his intelligence contact, desperately searching for the current trajectory of the unmarked cargo jet. The satellite telemetry indicates that the aircraft has changed its course, executing a sharp banking turn toward the coastline, where it intends to disappear into international airspace over the Atlantic Ocean within the next 15 minutes. Once the jet clears the maritime border, any military intervention will risk triggering a massive international incident, meaning the window to prevent a total national catastrophe is closing at an impossible speed. Miller grabs the tactical commander by his body armor, forcing him to look at the tracking screen, demanding that they authorize the use of a nearby experimental stealth interceptor drone stationed at a hidden government facility just 5 miles north. The commander hesitates, knowing that launching an unapproved military drone on domestic soil is an act of treason that will instantly end his career and land them all in a federal penitentiary. But as the distant horizon begins to glow with the fires of a city descending into unmanaged chaos, he looks at his men, reaches into his tactical vest, and pulls out the emergency authorization key. The heavy metal launch bay doors of the hidden northern facility slide open with a deep hydraulic groan, revealing the sleek, predatory silhouette of the autonomous stealth interceptor drone gleaming under the moonlight. Miller and the tech specialist sprint across the tarmac, connecting their portable tactical terminal directly to the drone's primary flight computer to override its safety protocols and input the cargo jet's last known coordinates. The drone's twin-jet turbines ignite with a terrifying high-pitched scream that vibrates through the very soles of their boots, kicking up a massive wave of heat and compressed air across the launch pad. With a violent burst of forward acceleration, the unmanned aircraft tears down the short runway and launches itself into the midnight sky, climbing at a vertical angle toward the upper atmosphere, to intercept the escaping syndicate before they reach the safety of deep international waters. On the tracking monitor, the two digital icons, the predatory drone and the escaping cargo jet, begin to close the distance between them, a high-tech game of chess played out at Mach 2 over the dark waves of the Atlantic. Inside the pressurized cabin of the cargo jet, the man in the dark suit sits calmly in his leather chair, watching the primary flight display as the aircraft approaches the invisible boundary line of international airspace. Beside him, the lead-lined metallic container rests securely on its mounting brackets, its internal cooling fans humming quietly as it stabilizes after the high-energy discharge test over the city. Suddenly, the aircraft's missile warning system begins to wail a frantic, high-pitched alert, indicating that a high-speed projectile has just locked onto their thermal signature from a blind spot directly below their tail assembly. The man's calm expression doesn't crack. Instead, he smiles, faintly, reaches into his pocket, and retrieves a secondary remote control device that was hidden inside the lining of his tailored coat. He doesn't attempt to execute evasive maneuvers or deploy standard flares. Instead, he activates a secondary hidden protocol embedded deep within the software of the very drone that Miller just launched. The screen in the SWAT command center suddenly flickers violently as a massive virus payload infects their terminal, rewriting the drone's targeting parameters in real time. Inside the pressurized cabin of the cargo jet, the man in the dark suit sits calmly in his leather chair, watching the primary flight display as the aircraft approaches the invisible boundary line of international airspace. Beside him, the lid-lined metallic container rests securely on its mounting brackets, its internal cooling fans humming quietly as it stabilizes after the high-energy discharge test over the city. Suddenly, the aircraft's missile warning system begins to wail a frantic, high-pitched alert, indicating that a high-speed projectile has just locked onto their thermal signature from a blind spot directly below their tail assembly. The man's calm expression doesn't crack. Instead, he smiles, faintly, reaches into his pocket, and retrieves a secondary remote control device that was hidden inside the lining of his tailored coat. He doesn't attempt to execute evasive maneuvers or deploy standard flares. Instead, he activates a secondary hidden protocol embedded deep within the software of the very drone that Miller just launched. The screen in the SWAT command center suddenly flickers violently as a massive virus payload infects their terminal, rewriting the drone's targeting parameters in real time. Through the thick black smoke and raining debris, Miller stumbles out of the wreckage, his ears ringing violently and his vision blurred by the intense heat of the burning tactical vehicles around him. He looks up into the night sky, his eyes straining through the darkness just in time to see the blinking navigation lights of the cargo jet cross the international border, disappearing completely into the vast, untraceable void of the ocean. The city behind him remains completely dark, a silent monument to a catastrophic security failure that will change the balance of power forever, orchestrated by an enemy that was always 10 steps ahead. The SWAT team's brilliant highway raid was never a victory. It was the opening gambit of a war they didn't even know they were fighting, a war where the rules are written by the shadows. Miller reaches down to his vest, turns off his dead radio, and looks at the broken security seal still clutched firmly in his hand, knowing that his mission hasn't ended. It has just become completely off the record. The jet was gone, but the hunt was just beginning.